Shalom and welcome. The Torah portion for this week is from the book of Deuteronomy. It's called Shoftim. Shoftim means judges. And the beginning of the portion, the first few verses, talks about how the Israelites must appoint judges in their cities, and how these judges must give fair judgment. They should not take bribes. They should not defer to particular people. And this little section concludes with a famous quote, Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice shall you pursue. Our rabbis teach us that this not only applies to the judicial system, but it also applies to how we ourselves live our lives. We have to live justly and righteously. We have to abide by the same principles of justice that these judges have to live up to. And this is how we create a just society for ourselves to live in. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice shall you pursue. There was once a man, a Jew, who decided he was going to take this statement in the Torah quite literally and search for justice. He set out to seek justice anywhere he could find it in the world. He traveled all over the world. He traveled to large cities, to small towns. He traveled to villages, searched the countryside, but he never found justice. As he traveled the world, he looked everywhere, place to place, until finally there was only one place in the world that he had not yet searched. It was a large forest. He stood before the forest and he looked, and he started into the forest, still searching for justice. He went into caves where thieves were hiding. Searching for justice, they mocked him. You think you're going to find justice here? He went on through the forest and he found huts where witches lived. He went into the huts and the witches mocked him. You're going to find justice here? Are you crazy? He continued on through the forest, forever searching. Finally, he came to a small clay hut. Nothing special about it, except that in the window he saw flickering light. He was curious about this, so he went up to the door and he knocked on the door. There was no answer. He knocked again, even harder. Again, there was no answer. He tried the door, found it open. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. And he was quite surprised when he stepped inside. This clay cottage, this hut, seemed to be much bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. It had rooms after rooms after rooms, on and on as far as he could see. And these rooms were filled with shelves. And on these shelves were oil candles, some in ornate candle holders built with precious metals or stone. Some were in small candle holders made of clay and very simple and plain. He was wondering what this was all about when an old man, white beard and long white robe, came up to him. Shalom Aleichem, my son. How may I help you? What is all of this? He asked. These are the candles of people's souls, the old man told him. When the candle burns brightly, the soul lives. When the candle dies out, that soul then departs from this world. Can you show me the candle of my soul? Of course I can, my son. Follow me. And this old man led him through different rooms. And finally they came into a room and stopped before one of the shelves. And the old man pointed. This is your candle. He looked at the candle. It was a small clay candle holder with a small wick and just a very little bit of oil. He thought to himself, is my death so near that I didn't know it? Then he looked at the candle sitting next to his on the shelf. It was also a small clay candle, but it was filled with oil, and the wick stood up straight and burned brightly. Whose candle is this? He asked. I cannot tell you that. I can only reveal the candle to the person whose candle it is. And the old man left. He stood there looking at these candles, thinking about what his fate might be. Suddenly he heard a spurting behind him. He turned around. He turned around and he saw smoke rising from one of the candles where the wick had burned out and dropped into the oil. And he realized that somewhere a soul had departed from this earth. He turned back and looked at his candle again. And he looked at the one next to it, so full of oil. And a terrible thought started to enter his mind. He looked around to see if he could find the old man. He looked every which way. He looked into other rooms. Finally came back to the shelf. He looked at the candle again. Then he reached out and lifted up the candle next to his. Suddenly the old man appeared, grabbed his hand, and gripped like iron. He said to him, "Is this the justice you've been looking for?" His arm hurt so much from the old man's grip that he closed his eyes. And then he was back out in a clearing in the forest. The hut was gone. The breeze was blowing through the trees, and the trees were whispering his fate. And he thought to himself, am I now dead? Shalom.